At the time Moses was born, the Israelites had been living in Egypt for several generations. Initially, they were welcomed and prospered there, but as their numbers grew, a new Pharaoh came to power and felt threatened by their presence. Fearing that the Israelites might one day rebel or join Egypt's enemies, the Pharaoh imposed harsh slavery upon them. To control the population of the Israelites, the Pharaoh issued a cruel decree. All Hebrew baby boys born must be thrown into the Nile River and drowned, while the baby girls could live. This was an attempt to prevent the Israelites from growing any stronger and multiplying. Moses was born to a Hebrew couple, Amram and Jochebed. His birth came at a time when the Pharaoh's decree was in full force, making it a dangerous and frightening time for his family. Jochebed, Moses' mother, was determined to protect her son. Instead of obeying the Pharaoh's decree, she hid the baby for 3 months. But as he grew, it became harder to keep him hidden, so she came up with a bold plan. Jochebed made a waterproof basket from papyrus reeds, coated it with tar and pitch to seal it, and placed the baby inside. She then set the basket afloat in the Nile River, leaving it among the reeds near the water's edge. She sent her daughter Miriam to watch over the basket from a distance, hoping for a miracle. By God's providence, the Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile to bathe. As she was walking by the river, she noticed the basket floating among the reeds and sent one of her attendants to retrieve it. When the basket was opened, she found a baby crying. Moved by compassion, she decided to adopt him, even though she knew he was a Hebrew child. Miriam, still watching from a distance, approached Pharaoh's daughter and offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam brought Jochebed, the child's own mother, to nurse and care for him. When the baby grew older, Jochebed returned him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he was raised in the royal court of Egypt. Pharaoh's daughter named him Moses, which is thought to mean drawn out, because she drew him out of the water. This birth story is a powerful example of how God works through human circumstances to bring about his will, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. After fleeing Egypt for killing an Egyptian taskmaster, Moses settled in the land of Midian. He became a shepherd, tending the flocks of Jethro, a Midianite priest, and married Jethro's daughter Zipporah. For years, Moses lived a quiet life in Midian, far removed from the turmoil of Egypt. One day, while Moses was tending the sheep, he noticed something extraordinary, a bush that was engulfed in flames but was not being consumed. Curious, Moses approached the bush to investigate. As he drew near, God called out to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses!" Moses responded, "Here I am." God told Moses to remove his sandals because the place where he was standing was a holy ground. Then God revealed himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God explained that he had seen the suffering of the Israelites in Egypt and had heard their cries for help. He declared his intention to rescue them and bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. God said to Moses, "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." Moses, however, was reluctant and full of self-doubt. He asked God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God reassured him, saying, "I will be with you." Moses then asked, "What if they ask me your name? What should I tell them?" God responded, "I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent me to you." To reassure Moses further, God gave him 3 miraculous signs to prove his power. The staff into a snake. God told Moses to throw his staff on the ground, and it became a snake. When Moses picked it up by the tail, it turned back into a staff. The leprous hand. God instructed Moses to put his hand inside his cloak. When he pulled it out, it was leprous, white as snow. Then he put it back in, and it was restored. Water into blood. God said Moses could pour water from the Nile onto the ground, and it would turn to blood. Moses was still hesitant and told God, "Pardon your servant, Lord, but I am slow of speech and tongue." God responded, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." When Moses still hesitated, God allowed Aaron, Moses' brother, to assist him as a spokesperson. Reluctantly but obediently, Moses returned to Egypt with his wife and sons. He met Aaron along the way, and together they began the mission of delivering the Israelites from Pharaoh's oppression. When Moses arrived in Egypt, he and his brother Aaron went straight to the Israelite elders. Aaron spoke the words God had commanded, and Moses performed the miraculous signs with his staff. The Israelites believed and worshipped, filled with hope that God would deliver them from slavery. Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh was defiant. "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Instead of releasing the Israelites, Pharaoh made their lives harder. The Israelites were angry with Moses, blaming him for their increased suffering. Moses cried out to God, and God reassured him, "I am the Lord. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment." God instructed Moses and Aaron to continue confronting Pharaoh. Each time Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh, they demanded, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he refused. God unleashed a series of plagues on Egypt to demonstrate his power. 1. Water to blood. The Nile River turned to blood, killing fish and making the water undrinkable. 2. Frogs. Frogs overran the land, invading homes and beds. 3. Gnats. Lice. Dust turned into gnats, swarming humans and animals. 4. Flies. Swarms of flies filled Egyptian homes, sparing the Israelites. 5. Livestock deaths. Egyptian animals died, but the Israelites' livestock remained unharmed. 6. Boils. Painful sores broke out on Egyptians and their animals. 7. Hail. A fierce storm of hail and fire destroyed crops and fields. 8. Locusts. Swarms of locusts devoured everything left after the hail. 9. Darkness. Darkness covered Egypt for 3 days, but the Israelites had light. Before the final plague, God gave the Israelites specific instructions: sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorframes with its blood. That night, the angel of death passed through Egypt, striking down the firstborn in every house without the blood. This event became known as Passover, marking God's protection over his people. 10. Death of the firstborn. God struck down the firstborn of every Egyptian family, but the Israelites were spared by marking their doorposts with lamb's blood. After the death of his own son, Pharaoh finally summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, "Go, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested." The Israelites, after generations of slavery, were finally free. They left Egypt in haste, carrying unleavened bread and treasures given to them by the Egyptians. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, guided by God with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They carried with them the promise of freedom and the hope of a new land flowing with milk and honey. This marked the beginning of their journey to the promised land, but their challenges were far from over. Pharaoh soon regretted letting them go. He gathered his army, including chariots and soldiers, and pursued the Israelites, determined to bring them back. When the Israelites saw Pharaoh's army approaching, they were terrified. Trapped between the Red Sea and the advancing Egyptians, they cried out to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" But Moses reassured them, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." God told Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea. He said, "Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground." Moses obeyed, and God sent a strong east wind that parted the waters of the Red Sea, creating a dry path through the sea with walls of water on both sides. The Israelites began to cross, walking safely on the dry ground. Meanwhile, the pillar of cloud moved behind them, standing between the Israelites and Pharaoh's army. It brought darkness to the Egyptians, but gave light to the Israelites. Once the Israelites had crossed, Pharaoh's army pursued them into the sea. At God's command, Moses stretched out his hand again, and the waters crashed back, covering the chariots, horses, and soldiers. The entire army was destroyed, and not one Egyptian survived. The Israelites stood on the other side of the sea, safe and free, and saw the power of God. They believed in him and in his servant Moses. In celebration, Moses and the Israelites sang a song of praise to God. Miriam, Moses' sister, led the women in a dance, singing and playing tambourines. After leading the Israelites out of Egypt and through the Red Sea, Moses guided them to Mount Sinai in the wilderness. God had chosen this mountain to reveal himself to his people. At Mount Sinai, Moses went up the mountain, and God spoke to him, saying, "Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession." The Israelites agreed to follow God's commands, and they prepared themselves to meet him by purifying themselves and abstaining from certain activities. On the third day, the mountain was covered in a thick cloud, accompanied by thunder, lightning, and the loud sound of a trumpet. The entire mountain trembled as God descended in fire. The people stood at the foot of the mountain in awe and fear. God called Moses to ascend the mountain alone to receive his commandments. God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, which were written on 2 stone tablets. These commandments outlined how the Israelites were to live in relationship with God and with one another. 1. You shall have no other gods before me. 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol. 3. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. 4. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 5. Honor your father and your mother. 6. You shall not murder. 7. You shall not commit adultery. 8. You shall not steal. 9. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. 10. You shall not covet. When Moses came down from the mountain with the stone tablets, he found the Israelites worshiping a golden calf they had made in his absence. They had grown impatient and turned away from God, breaking the covenant before it was even established. In anger, Moses smashed the stone tablets at the foot of the mountain and confronted the Israelites for their idolatry. Moses pleaded with God to forgive the Israelites for their sin. God showed mercy and renewed his covenant with them. He instructed Moses to chisel out 2 new stone tablets, and once again, Moses ascended Mount Sinai to receive the commandments. Moses spent 40 days and nights on the mountain. When he returned, he carried the new tablets to the people. The 10 Commandments became the foundation of the Israelites' relationship with God. They were placed in the Ark of the Covenant and served as a reminder of God's law and his faithfulness. No matter where you are right now, Moses' story reminds us that God is not finished with you. Maybe you feel unqualified, delayed, or unsure of your purpose. But just like Moses, your life is in God's hands. He has a plan greater than you can imagine. You are chosen. Moses was just a baby floating in a river, yet God protected him for a powerful mission. You were created for a purpose. God is leading you to a place of blessings, purpose, and victory. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story.